What's up everybody, raid testing back on the menu, and today we're taking a look at heroic Kel'thuzad in the new raid Sanctum of Domination. Keep in mind this is not a guide on how to do the fight, as it is very early testing, things will change and some things aren't working properly. So this is merely to give you all a taste of what to expect. So good old KT is back, perhaps for the last time. 3-phase fight alternating between phase 1 where you fight KT, phase 2 where you fight ads and or go into his phylactery to smack the remnant of KT, and after defeating the remnant inside the phylactery you get to fight KT and his ads. A lot of things going on in this fight and some interesting mechanics, so let's start off with phase 1 and the tank mechanic, Soul Fracture. Tank smack that deals around 30k shadow damage, knocks the player back and shatters their soul into 3 soul shards, or rather currently 3 green copies of the tank. They seem to spawn in a random pattern around the room. We tried standing in different spots to see if there was any reason to it, but it seemed to just be random. These souls needs to be nuked down, and upon defeating them, the tank that was hit by Soul Fracture needs to run over the souls to pick them up, and this is due to soul exhaustion. Each soul leaves a stack of soul exhaustion on the tank that increases physical damage taken by 500%, and it stacks so 1500%. And if all souls aren't recovered within 1 minute, the tank flat out dies. These souls also cast Piercing Wail, that deals around 12k shadow damage to the entire raid, and this was interruptible but unsure if that is intended. And this is because of the ability called Oblivion's Echo. KT debuffs random players, causing them to silence their allies within 10 yards, lasts for 6 seconds. Upon expiration they drop a pool of silence on their location, and you can silence the souls with these to keep them interrupted, which is why I'm unsure if them being interruptible by other means is intended or not. Would definitely be a lot more fun if you had to play around with the silence zones instead. KT will also target a few players with Glacial Wrath, and a few seconds after, a glacial spike spawns at their location, dealing frost damage and knocking players back within 6 yards. These glacial spikes will lose 5% health every 2 seconds, and once they reach 0% health, they shatter and deal around 16k frost damage per spike to everyone in the raid, and a dot that deals around 2k frost damage every second for 10 seconds. And you can DPS the spikes to offset this to avoid having multiple spikes or too many spikes shatter at the same time. More on the frosty side, KT will also hurl a chunk of ice at a random player, which deals around 160k frost damage divided among players within 8 yards of impact. So your standard meteor, comet, mechanic, what have you. But it also roots any player's hit for 12 seconds and deals around 5k frost damage every second while rooted. Now when Kel'thuzad reaches half mana, he will cast Dark Evocation, summoning Frostbound Devoted and dead players to fight by his side. And the dead player part is exactly what it sounds like. Any player that's dead when this goes off will be resurrected, buffed a ton, and effectively mind controlled. And the Frostbound ads seem to fixate on a player, and if they reach that player they detonated, dealing a large amount of shadow damage and knocking players within 5 yards back. Tooltip says touching a Frostbound will trigger this, but that didn't seem to be the case while testing. And when KT goes he will summon a blizzard that creates ice patches, and if you stand in an ice patch you take a large amount of frost damage every second, and these patches will grow over 20 seconds and then explode, dealing lethal damage to anyone within a patch. He also stopped using any other phase 1 ability during this blizzard. Now once Kel'thuzad reaches 0% health, phase 2 starts, and his phylactery will open, allowing players to enter it to fight his remnant, and a few seconds after that a wave of ads will spawn outside of the phylactery. But let's start off with the inside part. Now inside the phylactery, Remnant of Kel'thuzad patiently waits for players to smack him. Such a nice guy. Goal is to get him down to 66% first time you enter, then 33%, and lastly 0%. You have around 45 seconds to get him down to 66%, and failure to do so will result in an instant raid wipe. The remnant does not need to be tanked and will just stand in the middle of the phylactery while spamming some spells. He will spam swirls on the floor called Shadow Fissure that deal a large amount of damage and knocks you back if you get hit by one. Swirls bad? Who knew? He will also target a random player or location and fire off a freezing blast in in a line in front of him. It deals a large amount of frost damage and roots players hit by it for 4 seconds. And the third time you enter the phylactery, he will also spawn glacial winds, tornadoes that deal a bit of dam and roots players hit by them for 6 seconds. Players inside will also be inflicted by necrotic miasma, which is a stacking dot, if you will. So the longer you're inside, the more damage you will be taking. And once you got the remnant down to 66 or 33%, he will go immune and cast necrotic obliteration, which pretty much kills anyone inside. So this is just to force players to leave the phylactery once you've gotten him down. Now, while one gang is dealing with the phylactery and remnant, outside, KT will spawn a wave of adds that you had to deal with. For us, that was 2 unstoppable abominations and 3 soul reavers and a couple of frostbound devoted. The abominations uses demolish, unleashes a wave of necrotic energy in a line. Tooltips is turns towards a random enemy, but during testing it seemed to just hit wherever tank was facing them. Now the soul reavers uses Banshee's Cry, which is an interruptible cast. If it goes off, the Banshee will start to channel Banshee's Cry, which sends out shadowy missiles at random players every second, dealing a large amount of shadow damage. And every successful cast of Banshee's Cry increases the damage done by 25% and it stacks. These were tankable, smacked very hard, but they also moved very slow. So might be a case where it's intended to kite them, but that didn't really seem needed during testing. And once you've finished off the remnant in the phylactery, KT will resurrect at full health again. And if any add is up when he resurrects, their damage will be increased by 25% and they become immune to CC. So that's phase 2. Deal with the adds, smack the remnant down to 66% HP to get KT to resurrect. And anytime he does, he will also gain a stack of Necrotic Surge. His damage is increased by 5%, and each stack increases the amount of targets hit by Glacial Wrath and Oblivion's Echo. So next phase 1, you'll have 3 Glacial Spikes and 3 silence debuff zones. And by the end of the fight, you'll have 5 of each. Now, when you defeated the Remnant, which is the 3rd time you enter phase 2, phase 3 will trigger, which is pretty much phase 2 and 1 combined minus some abilities and the phylactery. You will get all the adds spawning, abominations and reavers and devoted, but he will stop using Soul Fracture, Howling Blizzard and Dark Evocation, but gains a new ability called Deep Freeze, which summons a deep freeze that continually creates ice patches, and if you stand in one, you take a ton of frost damage every second. So pretty much an all-out burn at that point. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this fight. All in all, I'm a big fan of most of the fight. There's a lot going on, a lot of mechanics interact well with each other, will require good coordination to deal with everything like killing off glacial spikes correctly, dealing with the Frost Blast Meteor Soak and Root, which in turn forces you to handle the Frostbound Devoted correctly, or you risk having one of them run into all the rooted players and blow them up. I do like the tank mechanic and the fact that the silent zones interact with the souls that spawns, and the fact that the tank mechanic involved the entire raid since they need to be nuked down. Not a huge fan of the phylactery phase, seemed a bit lackluster to me. Tiny room, mob in the middle, dodge some swirls, they could have done more with it, since it's really not the first time they've done a mechanic like this, and it is Kel'thuzad. So yeah, this is one of the more boring ones in my opinion, but overall, it looks like a really fun fight, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this fight on Mythic. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this first look. We'll cover all bosses on PTR, and proper guides will be out once the raid is released. I'm streaming all of the raid testing on PTR, so don't forget to check that out whenever there's raid testing announced. Otherwise, I'm streaming all of our main progression once it's live on Mondays and Tuesdays. If you have any questions at all about this encounter, hit me up in the comments or become a patron and get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can get help with anything raiding related. And don't forget the usual stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.